Please help me in giving a warm welcome to Brad Miller. Brad, come on up, man. That was good, right? That was good. All right, grab a chair, Brad. Pull it forward. Pick your favorite. All right.
Where are we sitting?
Anywhere up here where people can see us. Here we go. Okay, so cool here. Come up here so these side people. There we go. All right. So first, just talk about what Awareness Tech does and how you found the deal and the revenue it was doing when you found it.
Sure. So I was previous to that running another business called Perimeter, which was an internet security business. We had just sold half the business to Goldman Sachs. And as usual, when these things happen, I was there for 2 years and then looking to go do something else. I was looking at buying another company for Perimeter, but as I was leaving, I decided to buy it for myself. And so that business turned out to be Awareness Tech. Awareness Tech was also a secure internet security company, more of a software business. It had both a consumer, a B2C, and a B2B play. But on the consumer side, it was basically helping parents monitor and control their kids online. And on the B2B side, it was employers monitoring and managing their employees' productivity.
And what was top line and bottom line in 2010 when you found them?
They were about $5 million in revenue, losing $1 million.
And then what did you do in the first year?
Well, they had a weird. These guys are really, really smart, and I'll tell you an interesting story in a second, which I don't think I've ever told you. They're really smart guys, but they did a really dumb thing. They had a business set up as a software as a service business, but they sold the product as if it was a one-time sale. And so they had an ongoing relationship with the customer who would log in and, forever, but only get paid once. And so we converted the business from a one-time payment to a subscription, and that added $2 million of revenue overnight. So it went from $5 million to $7 million, and as all that revenue was profit, the business went from losing $1 million to making $1 million. I will tell you that the funny thing was the 2 years they worked for me afterwards, they were really building another business on the side. And I didn't like paying them a lot of money to build another business. So to shut me up, they offered me 10% in their new venture, which was a protein bar company. Don't ask me why. They were bodybuilders. And I was like, the world does not need another protein bar company. They later sold it for $1 billion.
You never told me that on the show. You told me the bar name. You haven't told them yet. Tell them the bar name.
Quest Bar. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Of course. That's crazy. You didn't tell me that.
Yeah.
You didn't have to pay for 10% in Quest. You just made them feel guilty?
Well, they offered it to me and I turned it down.
And then they give you, oh, you didn't take it.
I didn't take it.
Oh,
Worst
Brad,
decision.
you're an idiot.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Whoa.
Yep.
Wait, why didn't you take it? Why wouldn't you have said, of course?
Because I didn't feel right paying them to not work at my company in return for 10% of a piece of crap protein bar company.
Not everyone's perfect. That's incredible.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
So I'm not shitting money out of my ass now, am I?
Okay, so you go from and you didn't say the purchase price. So the company's doing 5, losing 1. What'd you pay?
We paid $6 million.
$6 million. And how'd you fund the $6 million?
Well, $5.5 million. Myself and a financial partner split it 50-50, and we did a little bit of bank debt on top of that. $1 million of bank debt to fund, the purchase price and some other expenses and all that kind of stuff.
And so you start scaling this 2011, $7 million revenue, $1 million profits. Did you take dividends out this year, or you waited till next year?
No, the next year. But then we finally got them off the payroll so that I wouldn't take the 10% that would have made me $100 million. And so, but it did save me $400,000 and $500,000 of payroll. So the business went from.
You want to put lipstick on that big? You go ahead. sounds like $100 million loss to me.
So then we were making $1.5 million, and then we grew a little bit more, and it grew to maybe $2 million. Then we acquired a small company.
Wait, hold on. I want to get everyone on the timeline here. So this is what people don't take dividends. I don't know why. I mean, you've heard some of it. Some folks say Bridget kicked us off talking about dividends, but you should take dividends, right? So, this is accurate, right? 136, is that about right?
Well, it was total of 12. So there was $1 million for a couple years, and then it grew to 3, then grew to 6. But yes,
Just because that's not in 2016, that's not revenue. That's what you took out, dividends, 6 million dividends.
correct. Yeah, we took out double what we put in before we sold it.
Yeah, it's incredible. So it made back more than the $5 million again before he sold it. Now, what I want to touch on here a bit is inorganic growth, which you were just about to go into. So talk about the first acquisition here.
So another funny story.
I missed out on Cliff Bars too.
No, I came home one day for dinner, and my wife had made dinner, and the kids were upstairs, and they were younger. They had phones, and she was like, "Okay,
old people don't have phones. What the?
No, but okay. So they were young kids, and so she was like, "All right, I got to get the kids." She called the kids down for dinner. They didn't come. And she goes, "Wait a second," and she pulled up her phone and started tapping shit on her phone and put the phone down, all proud of herself, waited, counted to 5, and all of a sudden we heard the kids come down. And I was like, what'd you do? And she's like, "Oh, it's the greatest it's the greatest parental app ever. I can shut off their iPhones, remotely." And I was like, "Do you know what business I'm in?" And so she had found this other parental app online. And so then I went and bought the company.
And it was growing. Yeah. But I'm shocked you didn't lose this deal, because what you told me was when you started negotiating, they were doing the LOI. They were doing $50,000.
They were doing $50,000 a month when we were negotiating, and by the time we closed it, 5 months later, it was doing $100,000, and then a year later, it was doing.
They asked you to pay double them between the LOI and the closing docs?
They did, but I didn't budge. I hung up the phone and didn't answer the phone for 3 days, and then they came back begging me to close the original deal because they had already spent the money. It was just a one guy. It was a guy and his wife, and they had already, they had bootstrapped it, and it was $3 million, and they were,
all cash up front for them.
It was half and half. It was half. We did a 50% up front, and then 50% if once the revenue passed a threshold, which it pretty much already did by the time the deal closed.
So this was 2016. So now with this first acquisition plus the core business, what was total revenue in 2016?
It was kind of approaching 12 million at that point.
And that's the same year you took out 6 million in dividends, right?
No, we were taking. We didn't take out this final 6 until 2017.
2017.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that first deal make sense? Any questions on the first deal from anyone? You can just yell them out.
It was just on a run rate, and you didn't know when it was going to stop, But
it's a good problem to have, right?
It just kept going, and
All right. So you buy it, you get that deal done. You like how that felt, and you said Brad wants more. Talk to us about the second acquisition in 2018.
So our biggest competitor, this is also an odd story, was a company called Variado, and at my previous business that I sold to Goldman, I was trying to buy them too. I got outbid heavily because they got sold for $45 million to two VCs, and it was a nice, business doing $15 million of revenue, making $6 million of profit. And then once, so when I saw Awareness Tech, which was like a number 2 to them, I was like, oh, okay, I've seen this movie before. If we could only grow this business a little bit, we can make a lot of money. And it was a 2-horse race between them and us, and so they were always our daddy, if you will, for a long time. And but then they started to shrink and do badly for a variety of reasons. And I got a call one day from a VC who said, "Would you be open to being for sale?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe." And they said, "Well, you would make a great tuck-in acquisition for another company we're looking at buying." And I knew there could only be one other company they could be talking about. And I was like, they must be for sale. And so I called up my investor who knew their investor, and we started a process, and they were starting to crash badly. We started a negotiation where we were going to pay them $19 million then they were doing $12 million of revenue. But by the time we closed the deal, they were on a $8 million run rate, and they had run out of money, and they couldn't meet payroll, so we bought it for $3.5 million.
That's a round of applause moment. I mean, holy crap. I mean, I imagine for anyone thinking about buying tuck-ins for their own business, they're going, how do I find a deal like that? So, I mean, is it luck? Can you program that?
I guess it was partial luck. I mean, we got a call from a VC thinking that we'd be a good tuck-in for that one. So we knew they would be for sale, and we figured, well, why not take a look at it, because we were now pretty profitable business, and we thought we could afford, we could, finance it. And in fact, when we first looked at it, and based on the numbers they shared, they were doing well. They were doing 12 million of revenue, making a couple million, and we felt we could take out $3 million of cost. So we had a term sheet to finance, all 19 million of the purchase price. But every time we turned around, instead of doing 2.5 million or 3 million a quarter, they were at 1.5 million a quarter. And every month we waited, the revenue just kept falling and falling and falling. And I mean, it was just one of these things where we just, if you hang around the hoop long enough, you'll pick up a trash basket.
There you go. That's a good one. I'm gonna put that on a shirt for you. Next interview, I want you to wear that one. So I guess the comp for maybe like Bridget, right? You Can Book Me, right? Is if she's looking at maybe buying other companies, the best way for her to get deal flow, like the deal flow you got, is to maybe bluff that she would be willing to be a tuck-in to a private equity firm's other scheduling tool, and then reverse it.
I think the message is just be in the flow, right? Just talk to a lot of people, be in the flow. And the more flow you're in, the more options you have.
Yep.
Swipe right as often as possible. And,
Fair. Fair. You're that guy. Options. Okay, here we go. All right, now you buy the company and then you cut 30 people, right? Talk to us about how that impacted bottom line.
They went from losing money to making $2 million, and so we were before we bought them, we were a $12 million business making $4 million at this point, and they added they were 8 and 2 now. And so now we were 20 and 6, and then we said, okay, time to sell the business, and
keep going.
And so we closed that deal in mid 2019, and we were talking to people to buy it in early 2020, and closed the deal late 2020 for 35 million. Which was on top of the 12 million.
So if we sum this full story up, there's a lot of moving pieces. We take the $5 million of initial investment. Okay, so let's make it $1, right? So you put $1 in. You turn that $1 into what over 10 years?
12 and 37, so 47. So five.
Divided by 5.
9 times.
Yeah. $1 to $9 on a $5 million base. It's pretty good, right? Good story. Okay, so the story gets more interesting. Can we go there?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, we're going to go there. Story gets, he has to because it's already on the next slide. But before we do that, any questions about just M&A strategy here in general? Just raise your hand if you've got one. How we bought these companies? Anything? All right, yeah, fire away. What's your name? Alex, fire away.
I came up with late earnings. Quasi-distressed companies or earnings
Quasi-distressed or healthy?
The first one was growing. So when I bought Awareness, it had grown from 1 to 3 to 5, so it was growing. But they were more consumer than corporate, and they were struggling growing in corporate. They were trying to sell the business as a B2B business. And when you read the book, it looked like it was a B2B business, but when you looked at the numbers, it was a B2C business. And the number of buyers for a B2C business is much lower than the number for a B2B business. And so it was distressed in that it was badly packaged. They were hoping to get a B2B multiple, but their book was overly ambitious for who they were. And I had just looked at buying their competitor, Variato, which was, 50-50 B2B, B2C. So I knew there was a B2B opportunity, a B2B market. And so, relative to them, they were maybe on the consumer side, there was like 2/3, 1/3 of the market. And on the B2B side, it was like 10 to 1. And so I knew there was a gap in the B2B market that they could fill, that they were struggling to do. And as it turned out, they were consumer guys. They knew how to sell protein bars and to consumers, and so they had come up with a good technology. They just couldn't figure out how to grow it out of their original consumer market.
So very distressed. Very distressed. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, fire away up here. Yeah, Gil.
If you were the investor, thank you. If you were the investor of that initial company, what advice would you give them so that they avoid that shark move?
What would I give? What?
What
Wait.
advice would you give them so that they end up better?
Wait,
than
hold on.
the
Which
outcome
company?
they
Which
This one-
company?
This one that he bought.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the one that the VCs put 45 in.
Oh, the 45 million in?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, so you're going to hear a second part of my story, which will emulate this story, which is the VCs bought the business from the original founders and decided the original founders weren't smart enough. These are the guys that grew it from 0 to 15 million and making 6 million in profit. To me, those guys are geniuses. They got rid of those guys and hired professional management.
So Gil, keep control of your board.
So I would tell those VCs, professional management isn't always the right answer.
All right, do you guys want to go into the next part of the story?
That's a very good question because it's a great segue.
It is. All right, so you sell it at about 20 million revenue in 2020. What happens next?
Well, so the short answer is the business will do 10 million in revenue this year. They brought in, guess what? Professional management. And professional management spends all their time hiring $2 million of overhead to, the best people, the greatest people. They don't actually manage the business day to day. And so they're adding cost in the business on one end, and the business is starting to decline on the other. They decided, we used to manage the business on a cash basis. So because we were very pay-per-click oriented, we needed to see sales, cash sales today, so we could measure the success
Quantify
of our
that. How much were you doing in monthly PPC you were managing?
$300K a month, and so over 3-4 million a year, and so it was the biggest source of our revenue, and so we had to really carefully see. We spend $1, we get back blank dollars. We had to really watch that. They changed the business to a GAAP basis right away, where you don't see the day-to-day revenue, and GAAP basically underestimates your revenue if you're growing, but overestimates your revenue if you're shrinking, because GAAP is an historical average over your last 12 months. And so the drop in revenue, they didn't know was happening because they weren't looking at the cash sales, they were looking at the GAAP revenue. And so we'd show up at these board meetings, and I'm still on the board, and they would show the GAAP revenue, and I'd be like, I can't make heads or tails of this. I mean, can someone show me the cash revenue? And they're like, oh, we're professional now. We don't do things on a cash basis. We do them on a GAAP basis. And then one day I show up at a board meeting.
Come on, can we be specific? Not one day, like a couple months ago.
Yeah, 3 months ago, I show up at a board meeting in March. They're high-fiving and chest bumping over how great the management is. Somebody in the audience here asked me, is this your company? And they showed me the website, and I was, I didn't recognize it, but it took me a minute to realize that it was, because they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to polish up a non-e-commerce website, and adding brackets to our logo.
Just those brackets. So $100,000 brackets.
And so between hiring $2 million of overhead and putting in time into brackets and a website that doesn't produce money, that's where the time went, but not watching the day-to-day running of the business. And so March, we're at a board meeting, everyone's high-fiving and chest bumping, and then the bank payment is due March 31st.
Well, they don't know why there's a bank payment. You got to tell them that first.
Oh, well, they bought our company using a lot of debt, which was fine when we were making $6 million a year, but not so fine when you're not making $6 million a year. And then, at the end of the month, they turned around and there was no cash in the kitty, and they told the banks they couldn't make the bank payment, the principal or the interest.
This bank these are your friends. I mean,
they were my original bank that re-upped in our deal. We were a much smaller loan. We had a loan with them, but not like that. And so, yeah, they just, the money was gone and nobody knew where it went. And, and it was, and they're in restructuring.
Right now.
Oh yeah, right now, and they haven't made a bank payment or an interest payment since March, and they might not for quite a while.
My prediction was this guy's gonna buy it back for $1. He's gonna be in New York keynoting. There's gonna be another thing on this graph, and it's gonna say I bought it back for $1, and now it's growing again.
Well, they're not desperate enough yet. So the VC has put in another $3 million to fund. So it's not only not making 6, they're actually losing money, because of course when you go from 20 to 10 million in revenue, and it's, that's a lot of lost profit, and you add $2 million of cost, that math doesn't work well. So it's like losing money quickly, and so they're putting more money into the business, which is good. I approve of that. But so we'll see what happens.
Guys, on that note, give this guy a round of applause. Brad Miller, Awareness Tech. Dude, unbelievable. Hell of a story.
I'm the guy that lost 100 million by not.
This story's, but we'll stick to this one next time. This one. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that, man.
you, sir.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
Oh.